Good evening and welcome. Welcome to the Joko. Joko conversation this evening is less of a conversation and more of a monologue as Tasha, my comrade, my partner, is taking tonight off. And I'm coming to you for a shorter time than we ordinarily do. I am Brother Youssef, a member of the Joko, Dr. Wilfred Youssef Doucet, PhD, a scholar of cultural studies, an instructor of composition and creative writing and literature. Really happy to have you join me this evening, this morning, this afternoon, whenever you may be watching this. Welcome. Welcome to the Joko. As always, we like to start by acknowledging that we know we work in the tradition of our ancestors, our African ancestors, those first ancestors, those ancestors who survived the human trafficking, those ancestors who have thrived here in the Americas despite the most horrendous of conditions and policy and war waged upon us. We always also acknowledge that the work we do, and we specifically here on this Turtle Island, do so specifically in that area called the Los Angeles Basin, the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, in what is the unceded territories of the Tongvakish people, the indigenous peoples of the Los Angeles Basin, northern Orange County, the inland areas of the San Gabriel Valley and the San Fernando Valley. Tonight, let me start with what I think was one of the best lines I heard this week. Listening to the Michelangelo Signorelli show, and a caller called in and assessed the current political moment, or at least how we got to this political moment. Something to the effect, Americans gave up their country over the price of eggs. And that I laughed when I heard it, and it struck a chord with me because it did speak to a kind of immediacy, right, and people's concerns when they were voting last November, now nearly a year ago, and thinking in terms of short-term hopeful gains that have not materialized, right, as the price of food continues to go up, and the price of everything continues to go up in this economic crisis, tariff-driven, crisis-driven. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about tonight. I just, I just wanted to start with that, right? Americans gave up their country over the price of eggs, because it's really about to whom did they give up their country? And the answer is fascist, right? Homegrown U.S. American fascism, as had been predicted by many scholars, political commentators, artists, wrapped in the stars and stripes and carrying a cross, a Bible, and the firearm of your choice. So specifically, this regime, right, the Trump regime, because again, in electing Trump a second time, less than a majority, a plurality of those who voted, and probably the most significant number of voters are those who did not vote. disgusted by both parties, turned off by the system, and encouraged by the fascist MAGA party not to vote, except for those low low turnout voters that they specifically wanted to target, and ignored by the Democratic Party, who did nothing to try to rouse that group to forestall this intensification of fascism. So, something that hasn't been in the news, and that's really kind of the issue, right? Our title tonight, Criminalizing Dissent and Dissenting Anyway. The first part of that, right? The criminalizing dissent. Very little attention is being paid in the mainstream media to National Security Presidential Memorandum 7. And these presidential memorandums carry more weight than the executive orders. And we know that the Trump administration has just bombarded policy, citizenry with these executive orders, right? Rule by executive order. And of course, a derelict or Republican-controlled Congress that is just letting these executive orders, operate. They're only supposed to be good for a year, I thought, right? They're supposed to be good for a year, and then have to be made law or rejected, right, by Congress. So we'll see what happens with this, because it is such an avalanche of executive orders. But the presidential memorandum are different, right? They carry more weight, and I think that number 7 means that there have only been 7 ever issued, and this particular one, if people have been paying attention to the language that initially has been coming from Stephen Miller, identifying the Democratic Party, this at best centrist party with some fringes center left, but primarily centrist and center right, opposition party, completely compromised by finance capital, by the demands of its APAC donors. This party has been declared a terrorist organization. And whether Stephen Miller, in an off-the-cuff speech, or although I don't think any of it is really off the cuff, but because of the importance of the repetition, right? As he says this in interviews, in the speech he gives at funerals. At what point does it become policy that this center-right, centrist opposition party, the second partner in the duopoly, is treated as declared a terrorist organization, and everything left of that? And that is to be taken seriously when you go down the list of what falls under that memorandum: anti-American activity, anti-Christian sentiment, anti-American sentiment, so-called extreme race ideology, extreme gender ideology, etc. So any dissent, any narrative, any pushback on the mainstream dominant narrative that recenters the experiences of primarily of affluent white Christian men can be declared anti-American, terroristic. This is nothing short of an effort to legalize the criminalizing of dissent. How is that going to play out? We don't know yet, but we can guess. We already saw leading up to the No Kings rally of this past weekend, the language of the GOP and the language of the Speaker, Mike Johnson, the language of other Republican members of Congress, characterizing it as the so-called Hate America speech, and the repetition, despite all research evidence, despite all recent lived experience, that the problem of political violence in the United States is primarily a problem of right-wing violence. The United States Department of Justice, the United States executive branch, removed from their website in just the last couple of months their own internal National Institute of Justice report on domestic terrorism that revealed that 80% of terrorism, or what is called domestic terrorism, is committed by right-wing, primarily white nationalist groups. This is removed from the website, and the lie is pushed that the number one form of political violence is so-called left-wing violence. Speaker Johnson is continuing this. So in response to the No Kings marches and rallies and demonstrations from this past weekend, a lot of the GOP commentary has been on the rhetoric, right? The rhetoric of the marches. And again, the claims of left-wing terror cells and violence, and everyone knows that left-wing violence is the number one form of political violence, and this rhetoric is stoking the violence, and they offer no evidence for their claims. No evidence for the claims. And, for the life of me, and I try to stay up on events in the news, when has been the most recent act of political violence, even property damage, that can be identified as left wing? It certainly isn't making national news if it isn't and it hasn't been in local news here in Southern California or California broadly. So what are they talking about, right? What left-wing violence that is a scourge on the country right now? Even the so-called two assassinations, and I say so-called two assassination attempts on then candidate Donald Trump, because in the second so-called attempt, no one shot anyone. No one, shot. They did not find the assassin with the gun. They found some guns, and later they found the owner of those guns, and that person has not been charged with attempted murder, but something else. And then the first attempt, whatever it was, and we know somebody was shot, right? Because that firefighter died, and whatever happened to Trump's ear. But we also know that shooter had been a registered Republican, even if in that moment he may have been politically neutral or whatever the case may be, and we don't know because he didn't survive the incident. But prior to that, he could not be described as left-wing anything. And the most current high-profile assassination. The same has to be said for the young man that they have under arrest for the assassination of Charlie Kirk, as he continues to or be non-cooperative and is not just confessing to the official story, which many sectors, across the spectrum, the political spectrum, are throwing doubt on. Okay, so one of the other things I wanted to do tonight, so I wanted to bring that up, right, to talk about this national security Presidential Memorandum 7, because it's serious and we need to take it serious. And those of us who declare ourselves to be on the left, however that's being defined, and the right wing, the empowered right wing, defines that very broadly, very broadly. Again, the Democratic Party. Now, an argument can be made for the terroristic activities of the Democratic Party, but it's not the kind of terrorism that Stephen Miller, J.D. Vance, Mike Johnson, Donald Trump are talking about, right? It's the state terror that they themselves perpetrate. It needs to be covered, and more than that, those who are legitimately on the left need to be prepared, right, for a response. Now, these efforts to criminalize dissent has not kept people from dissenting, and in fact, what the No Kings marches, rallies, demonstrations showed is that dissent is really on the rise, right? Is from June to October, there was a growth, right, from 5 million to 7 million. More and more independents, more and more Republicans, as MAGA is having some attrition. Now there have been some very good critiques of the No Kings rally, marches, demonstrations, and some of those critiques were already happening even before the day approached, and mainly, right, as all this energy was being focused on Saturday, October 18th. Folks were asking, what about the 19th, the 20th, the 21st going forward, right? What is to be made of this mobilization? And there has been critique over the performative character, and I think the lack of call for organization, at least generally. Except I wonder, though, if that's completely accurate. So can't report back on everything that happened in the country. I did not go to the June No Kings rally, but decided to go. Tasha and I decided to go this year. We're both educators. There were several in Southern California, several in Los Angeles that then converged on Grand Park, which is the park that leads to City Hall in Los Angeles, or the way it is structured, in that surrounded by, or at the top of it, the theater center, and as you come down, a lot of legal buildings leading directly to this coming down the hill tiered park leading to City Hall. And we chose, as educators, to join the rally at the LA Unified School District building, which was, well attended by primarily, folks working in education, right? Educators, supporting staff, facilities, people, families. And it had a labor vibe to it, right? Teachers are one of the best organized and most important union organizations in the country. As I recall, the SEIU participated in that rally. At least one Democratic representative, although I don't remember his name, so I'm not going to try to call it. What one might expect, sort of calls to get out the vote. The again, looking to the electoral, right, as a path out. But it wasn't the only thing that was called for, right? As I said, there was a labor feel to it, and there was calls for labor solidarity, efforts to organize, booths for people to sign up, right? So organizing was going on, right? It was not just calls, but actual activity, giving people something to do, ways to get connected. The rally then, right? Once that rally ended, I think it was what, 11-1, or 12-2, 12-2. Then the folks at that rally, were marched to Grand Park, right? They marched from where LA Unified is, to Grand Park. Other marches were doing the same. Tasha and I made our way over to Grand Park, though we didn't march with the other folks from the education-focused rally. And we didn't, and really didn't go down into the heart of it, right? So I can't really say what the speakers were saying. We stayed kind of up top where a lot of other gray heads were, resting. But people were making community. People were sharing their signs with each other. There was a cross section of Los Angeles there, at least ethnically. And I think class-wise also, workers were there. There was organizing going on. I did take a walk down into the main area where the speakers were, the largest part of the crowd was, as people continued, right, to fill in that space. And just to get a sense for it, there was an elected official speaking, but I have to admit I didn't pay a lot of attention to what she had to say, as I was, more interested in what was going on around me. I saw booths up where, again, people were taking signatures, doing some kind of organizing. There was a sense, I got a sense, that there were enough people out there who were thinking about what's going to happen on Sunday the 19th, what would happen on Monday the 20th, etc., right? Thinking long term, beyond the performance of that day. And I think, looking at some of the commentary that came from that was on Fox News, as the right wing was rattled by the number of people who showed up, and in all the various places they showed up, including places that would be considered Republican strongholds, MAGA strongholds. So they were talking about the problem of the Democratic Socialists of America and the Party for Socialism and Liberation signing people up. They specifically accused the SEIU, what is that, Service Employees International Union, members, booths, of encouraging folks to get involved with DSA, or the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And if that's true, I think that's great. Right? That's the sort of thing that should have been happening. Now, of course, I maybe it was Laura Ingram's show or Megyn Kelly. I'm not. No, I think it was Laura Ingram's show because it was. I think it was on Fox. Um, they approached it as how horrible, right? And see, this is what um, the problem is. But no, this is great. This is exactly what should have been happening, and that they were worried about it, worried enough about it to report on it. I think it's significant. It points to both the nervousness created by the movement, or well, I don't want to call it a movement, right? That's premature. But by the demonstrations and rallies and marches this weekend, and the sense of camaraderie, I know that I certainly felt. I think that my partner Tasha experienced, and there were certainly all kinds of like political tendencies out there. But there's, again, there is strength in numbers, and there is a way in which seeing how many people came out from various parts of the city, various, ethnic groups, class strata, was encouraging, right? It's the sort of thing that people need. So, that some organizing did come out of the No Kings rally. The diverseness of it, and now I don't even mean sort of the diverseness of Los Angeles that did indeed show up, but the fact that it was, so many areas, right? Something in Culver City, something in Santa Monica, something in Westchester, things in the San Gabriel Valley, things in the Inland Empire, things in small towns throughout the United States and other parts of the world. This is important, as in this country and everywhere in the world, fascism is attempting to take hold, take us back to an older colonial order, and people are resisting, initially in the only ways they know how. That is not above critique, but it also needs to be recognized. The Party for Socialism and Liberation was supposed to be out there, trying to get their message across to people who are ready for a change, right? We let us not ignore what the popularity of a candidate like Zoran Mamdani means, right? What it can mean. It makes me wonder how the sister from Seattle, how her campaign is going. I'm going to mess up her name. I'm going to see if I can find it really quick as I try to close. So with all of that in mind, though, there's another march coming up that people should want to support. And that is the 17th annual march from the Black is Back Coalition, the 17th annual March on the White House. It's coming up, actually, I think in 2 Saturdays. Let me share my screen. There you go. 17th annual Black People's March on the White House. This is the call. Initiated in 2009 to challenge the post-racial neo-colonial message of the Obama administration and the complacency that was setting in, somehow equating the election of Obama, again, a right-center politician, as somehow accomplishing a revolution, making the United States post-racial. And, it's important, post-racial, not post-racist. And it never was, right? It wasn't even post-racial. So the first one was initiated then, and then they have continued since. So don't agonize, organize. the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace and Reparations, 17th Annual Black People's March on the White House. Friday, October 31st, there will be a press conference at noon at Sankofa Books and Cafe in Washington, 2714 Georgia Avenue Northwest. Pre-rally at 1DC Black Workers Center, 2500 Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue, Southeast, from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And then the rally on Saturday, November 1st, 2025, Malcolm X Park. If you were willing to get out there, Washington, and wherever you might be watching this, if you can get to Washington, being out there for the No Kings rally was important. How about getting out there for the Black is Back Coalition's Black People's March on the White House? The Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. Can you get behind that? Join the Black People's March on the White House. Saturday, November 1st, 2025, Malcolm X Park. Rally begins at 11 a.m. And then I think the rally, and I'm guessing now, but I believe the rally then, once the rally is over, it is a march to the White House. But you have to go to find out if I'm right or wrong. So I hope you can go. Keynote speaker, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, chair of the Black is Back Coalition, chair of the African People's Socialist Party. So that brings us to a close tonight. I just wanted to hit on those few things, right? This regime is criminalizing dissent, and they're doing it more than rhetorically. The rhetoric is important, right? The rhetoric of calling even the Democratic Party a terrorist organization, painting everyone left of MAGA as terrorists or potential terrorists. They're setting the ground, right? They're preparing the ground for further repression. So we need to pay attention to this national security presidential memorandum 7, right? NSPM 7. It's really important. Again, carries more weight than an executive order. And it is explicitly looking to criminalize dissent, to define as terroristic what it defines as anti-Americanism. So just that notion, the notion of anti-Americanism, of so-called being anti-Christian, anti-traditional family, gender ideology extremism, which they can lump a whole bunch of stuff in, racial or race ideology extremism. Reminds me of the FBI made up term, Black identity extremists. So they're creating pretext to intensify and clamp down on opposition. So please do your research, do your reading, pay attention, get organized, think about how you're going to need to respond if you are really leftist. And for them, liberal is too far left. The National Security Presidential Memorandum 7. Don't take it lightly. Ask about it. Get people talking about it. It should be covered because they are coming for you. Despite this effort to criminalize dissent happens. Whatever the critiques may be of the No Kings marches and demonstrations, it happened. It does show the level of discontent in the country with the current policies, the unpopularity of the Trump regime, the Trump policies, the 2025, the Project 2025 policies, the coddling of the billionaires. And it is an opportunity to organize for some effective change. Part of that organization, part of that movement is happening in 2 weeks or 2 weekends. Not this Saturday, but next Saturday. November 1st, Malcolm X Park in Washington, D.C., the Black People's March on the White House. If you can be there, you should be there. Rally begins at 11 a.m. So, quick little repetition and summation. I'm going to wrap it up tonight because I got to go get my granddaughter. And that's a drive to Palmdale from Los Angeles. And all the way, I'm going through Tonga territory. All right. Though there may be another nation that lives in the, indigenous to the Palmdale area and northern San Fernando Valley. But anyway, I digress. I'm trying to say good night. So thank you for being with me. We will be back again. Let me try to remember to, do all the things I'm supposed to do. Like remind you to subscribe if you haven't subscribed. I saw that we picked up at least one new subscriber, maybe 2 or 3. Thank you. We're so small still, right? So we want those. We need your subscriptions whenever you might be watching this, and please like it. Help us out with the algorithm. Please like it and share. And with that, I will not belabor it. I will say good night and end, as I often do, by quoting Bob Marley. Revelation reveals the truth. It takes a revolution to make a solution. So y'all, let's make a revolution. See you next week. Maybe before.